can't believe it, I picked up the Natasha Denona Pastel Palette. I am so excited. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Michaela. I do videos focusing on beauty and lifestyle and would love to have you around. But let's just go ahead and get right into this palette. I don't normally pick up new releases. I mean, every once in a while if I have my eye on something, I'll pick it up. But I got this the day it launched. I was so excited. Here it is. Here are the colors. So let's just go ahead and do a thoughts, review, an eyeshadow look. I've got a clip of swatches that I'll go ahead and insert, and I've got some palette comparisons. But just kind of on my initial thoughts, first of all, I love, love, love the coloring on this palette. I love the shades in this palette. When I saw this palette online, I immediately knew that I needed it because it was Natasha Denona and it was full of my favorite colors. If I were, as a person, embodied into an eyeshadow palette, this would be it. Pastels are my favorite. I wear pastels all the time. I love the springtime. I love the colors of spring. My wedding was in spring. My wedding colors were more spring toned. I love the pinks. I love the blues. I love everything about this palette. But upon looking at it, it's not a palette that is definitely going to be for everyone. It's not a palette that is going to be deep at all. You're not going to get a very deep look out of it. The deepest shade is this, and even this palette, this color swatched, is not that deep. I have yet to try it on my eyes, but I will go ahead and do that. So stay tuned for later on in the video. But this shade right here is probably going to be your deepest bet. So you're not going to get a lot of deep or sultry looks. You're going to get some light looks, some airy looks, some fun looks, some like bubbly kind of spring looks. Definitely some pastel palettes for like, if you're looking for an eyeshadow palette that you want to wear on Easter. I know for my family, Easter is a day that we typically dress up with a lot of fun colors, so this would be the perfect palette to pair with any of them. You are probably going to want a complementary palette because you're not going to have any neutral mid-tones. You've got a lot of mid-tones here. You've got like a minty mid-tone here, a lighter pink here. I mean, this here could also be a mid-tone transitional shade, and this one here. But you're not going to get any muted colors. This is a very colorful palette. So if you're all looking for that, you're not going to get that in this, which I think is totally fine. Natasha Denona advertises it as a pastel palette. So if you are expecting more, I'm sorry, you're just not going to get that with this. I don't see a reason to complain about it because the advertisement was very, very clear as to what kind of palette this is. But if you are looking for something more deeper, I would, or even more neutral, I would recommend adding a palette to compare with this. So this might not be a palette that you would, if this were the only palette in your eyeshadow collection, this is probably not gonna work for you unless you wear these tones on a regular basis anyway, and this is what you're wanting. But if you are wanting a complementary palette, it might be worth the splurge. Now again, I at this moment have yet to try on the palette. I will do that in my next clip, which by the time I'm filming this, I plan on doing my little initial tutorial first impression try on tomorrow. And then I'll do my review after that. But I did want to go ahead and compare this to some other palettes in my collection. I have a stack here of some palettes, and some of them are like, a lot of these are single shades that, you know, it may not be worth your money if you're in it for a specific color story, or you're just wanting like a shade or two out of the palette. But let's just go ahead and start. I have the E.L.F. Bite Size Quad in Mint Melt. And this eyeshadow palette here, if you're looking for more green pastel tones, this palette may be what you're looking for. I'm trying to find a way to compare the two. But this one may be good, especially because you are going to get the deeper green over here. And these three shades here may very well work if you are in this palette for the mint tones. Another good mint option is the Colourpop Mint To Be palette. And again, this is what you're gonna want if you're looking for more of the minty tones. Now, the mint tones aren't gonna be exact dupes. I feel like maybe this shade here and then this shade right here are gonna look pretty similar on the eyes. But if you are wanting more green tones and pastel tones, this is the way to go. And the formula, I feel like the Colourpop formula is very similar to Natasha Denona. I think Natasha Denona has a little bit more pigment in my opinion. Just the quality, the way it's made, it's overall nicer. But if you don't know eyeshadows, you're not going to know the difference. Another palette I picked up, and I have to be very careful with this is because I have a shattered shadow, is the Colourpop On Cloud Blue palette. Again, if you're wanting the blues in this palette, you're going to get your variety in here. I do feel like a lot of the shades are very similar. Like there are a lot of the shades in the Colourpop palette that look very similar swatched and may be very similar on the blues here. So because these all look so similar, then you're definitely gonna, but there's only one or like just a couple, like 2 or 3 shades in here that would work, but they're all gonna look a little bit different. So that's kind of, I don't know if you're gonna understand what I meant by that, but most of the shades in that palette look extremely similar to one another, whereas the blues are all slightly different in here. So in that sense, that might be a little bit more worth it. Again, it just depends on what you want and what you're wanting to spend. The Colourpop is obviously way more affordable than Natasha Denona. Another palette, a more recent launch that I wanted to pick out was the Urban Decay Naked Cyber. And I say this palette because of these 2 shades right here. Now, I highly doubt the swatches are gonna work on camera, but the light, yeah, you're totally not going to see that. Especially like these 2 shades here and even the shades over here. I know the reviews on this palette aren't the greatest. I personally don't mind it, but I know a lot of them are definitely not going to be the greatest. But these shades here definitely remind me of these 2 shades here. Let's see, and again, I don't know, swatches are more than likely not going to work out, and I've got all the palettes in my lab, I keep dropping them. But I feel like, yeah, again, that's totally not going to show up. But I feel like these shades in this palette are going to be pretty similar if you are wanting a more of a high-end price point versus a luxury palette price point. I mean, I believe this is like $49, either $49 or $55, and then this is the $65. So I feel like you could get similar shades, but again, because this palette doesn't have the greatest reviews, it's very Urban Decay buildable formula, whereas Natasha Denona, you're gonna get the pigment right away. So this one might be worth the extra $15, $20 to have way better quality. But if you do have the Urban Decay palette, you might not need this. That's really going to be dependent up to you. I've got a couple more eyeshadow palettes that I want to compare. I have the Alamar. This is the Spanglish palette. I got this in a box at Triochrome last year, so I don't even know if it's still available. But I've got this one here. Definitely the tones are a lot more deeper, but you're still going to get like your purples, your pinks. The tones, I don't feel like there are any exact color dupes, but you've got like the peaches, even like a couple of the purples, and like this shade over here could be very similar to like the purples and pinks in this palette, but again, not an exact dupe. And you do have a brown, which could tie in a look. So there is that option. And then another box charm palette. This is the Ofra mini mix palette and Good to Go. I feel like the orange here is very similar to the orange in this palette. Same with this teal blue here. Very similar to like to this shade as well as this shade. So this could be good if you're in it, again, for those minty shades. And then one palette, there's a shade in the Too Faced Pretty Rich palette. This is definitely by no means a dupe or a comparison, but the shade Clutch Your Pearls is almost identical to the shade Illusion with that purple, with that white to pinky kind of purpley shift. Other than that, I don't feel like the palettes are at all similar. Just that one shade immediately when I swatched it reminded me of that. And then just for comparison's sake, the Natasha Denona Triochrome palette. Again, they are definitely not dupes at all for each other. Some of the greens kind of remind me in this palette, remind me a lot like this green shade here, like this one and this one, but definitely not, I don't feel like they're identical for each other. This one is $129. So if you are looking for more pastel tones, you've got this one. I mean, some of the pinky purple shades here could definitely be an alternative for these ones, or vice versa. So considering that this is actually cheaper, from what I've heard, I don't have the palettes, from what I've heard and seen, I don't remember the exact shades that were dupes or that are repeat shades from, I think it was it Circo Loco or the Tropics palette, or maybe a combination, but I believe it was something along the lines of limoncello, maybe some of the blues here. I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure that this one was a repeat shade. So I think it's like 3 shades that are repeat shades from a couple of the other palettes. Again, I don't own the palettes. I haven't really looked into the palettes. I'm going just based off other things I've heard on YouTube with some reviews and things like that. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the look. Alright, it is the next day, so let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. I'm thinking I want to play around kind of with these few shades over here. So let's go ahead and start in with a big fluffy brush and go into the shade Bellini and put that into the crease. Now I just used my typical Elizabeth Mott eye primer. I know with pastels you're supposed to use more of a brighter base, but I guess this here will test the true integrity of the shadows. So let's just go ahead and do that, and that's actually showing up really well for being just, it's a really light shade. It's almost right at my skin tone, but it's showing up really well because it is Natasha Denona. I do have really high expectations, especially because it is a luxury brand. That seems to be doing really, really well. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick up on it right away, but I am liking that. Next, I'm going to go in with a more dense brush here. I might have to go in my finger in a minute, but I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up this shade Starlit. And that's going to get placed all over the lid. I don't quite know what I'm going to do with my outer V yet, but we're just kind of going for it. That's pretty, ooh, that's picking up really nice. What I love about Natasha Denona shimmers is that you don't have to use your finger. You can just go in with a brush. But let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to use my finger and just to see how much more intense I can get it. Ooh, that's pretty. That's really, really pretty. Ooh, I like that. I really, really like that. And it kind of has that orange kind of peachier shift. I'm going to go back in with that transition shade and place that and just kind of bring that out a little bit. Alright, I'm trying to decide what else I wanted to do. I think I'm going to go in, I don't know if I want to maybe use either Mint Frost or Limoncello. I think I want to go more minty because I really love minty tones with peaches, so I'm going to go in with Mint Frost on a pencil brush and place that in my inner corner. Ooh, yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and take another teal shade and go in with the shade Brisk, and I'm going to put that on my lower lash line. That is definitely Natasha Denona quality, and because of how hard pastel shades are hard to do, and I've noticed you really have a hard time getting the quality out. That is showing up great, and I don't have any primer or anything on my lower lash line at the moment. I'll come back and do concealer in a minute. But considering that I don't really have a base, if I had like a white base, these shadows would be really, really gorgeous. I think I'm going to go ahead and take one more shade. I think I'm going to go in with my finger and go in with the shade Limoncello. I'm going to place that, just pop that in the center of my lid just to see what kind of pop I can get. Probably not the best pairing, but I just wanted to kind of see if I can use that as a topper, but it definitely adds some iridescence to the lid. I don't want to take away from the red that's already there, but that's pretty. I like that. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of my face and come back and show you the final look. Alright, and that's the face done. I went ahead and paired, for the lip combo, I used the Artist Couture Caliente red lipstick, just a touch of this with the E.L.F. Paradise Retro Lip Gloss, or the Retro Paradise Lip Gloss. I don't think this is available anymore, but any lip gloss would do. I just put a tiny bit of this mixed with this, put it all over the lip, and I feel like it matches the eyeshadow, the shimmery shade, perfectly. But let me go ahead and zoom you out and I will give you some of my initial final thoughts on this palette. Alright, it is the end of the day by the time I'm filming this outro, so I figured let's go ahead and wear test it. It is about 4 o'clock right now. I've had my makeup on since about 9:30, so what is that? It's been about 7.5 hours or so since I put it on, but let's just, I don't know, I'm gonna see if we can tell on camera what this looks like. Hopefully it's picking up, but to me, the eyeshadows did not budge. I did use my most reliable primer, and the colors are still very vibrant. The glitter and the red is definitely good. The teal on the lower lash line, I did go ahead and put it on again after I did my foundation and concealer, and that definitely seemed to help brighten it up a little bit. I did not use an opaque primer at all, so considering that, I just kind of used my personal go-to primer, but with a pastel palette like this, the wider the base, the more vibrant it would be. And considering I did not use a base with really hardly any color at all, just enough to give the eyes an even coat of color, it performed beautifully. It definitely did not sheer out like pastels typically do. Pastels are really hard to work with, so I definitely noticed that luxury Natasha Denona quality, and I love it. Again, if you were to put like even like a bright blue base on with it, like a colorful eyeliner or a colorful stick eyeshadow, and then added in a color on top of it, virtually any color that would match any one of the tones in here would really make the colors pop, whether it be a white base or a green one to match the greens or blues or pinks. That would really make the colors stand out. But considering that I used absolutely no base with no color, the colors are still standing out beautifully. For a pastel palette, I do feel like this is pretty wearable. You definitely need to be a color lover, and even more so a pastel lover, to love this palette. So I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, especially if you are a neutral lover. I mean, that's pretty obvious in my opinion. But the colors are very wearable, but I definitely feel like you can build them up, get a lot of intense looks out of it, and get creative. Like, this is definitely a palette that if you're wanting to get your creative juices flowing, this is going to be it for you. So would I recommend this palette for everybody? No, definitely not. But for those who are wanting a good pastel color, a good colorful palette, a good pastel palette, this is worth your money, and especially because pastels are hard to work with anyway, this is definitely going to give you the quality. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you would like to see some additional looks with this palette. I would not mind doing some colorful Easter looks for you guys. And with that, I will see you in the next one. God bless, and bye guys.